Hi Mohit, how are you? How's it going?
Hi Arvind, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good too. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining in for this, and congrats again for your Ross admit.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the goal behind this debrief, Mohit, is to basically hear from you on your experience, your background, why you wanted to pursue an MBA, why particularly at Ross, and also the application process itself, right? The various components that go into it, CV, essays, interviews, and also scholarship, right? Because you had applied also for the Tauber scholarship, which we'll touch upon a bit, and then also your tips or insights for candidates. So broadly, we want to touch on your experience as, let's say, being part of one of the most competitive pools. I mean, the Indian engineer pool is the most competitive, right? And breaking into a top 15 MBA with a good scholarship is no easy feat. So the goal is to have you sort of share your experience that will hopefully help future applicants that'll be in similar shoes.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks again, Arvind, for setting this up. Yeah, I would love to share some of my experiences throughout my MBA application journey. Coming to my background, yeah, I'm born and brought up in Bangalore, and I have a background in electrical and electronics engineering from RV College in Bangalore. And post that, I joined Airbus in the flight simulation team. So basically, here my role was to develop and deliver software which is used for training pilots for airlines. So post that, yeah, after 4 years of experience at Airbus, I decided to transition into an operations kind of background or something to do with product management. So that's the motivation behind pursuing an MBA.
Right, right. Can you talk a bit about your role with that Airbus? What kind of it's an exciting space to be in, right? Aircraft and also engineering, technology, and so on. So, what kind of topics do you work in, and who do you work with, etc.
Yeah, sure. Basically, the work revolved around this device called a full flight simulator. So pilots train on this device, before they go into airlines and work for airlines. It's very crucial that they be trained on the right behavior of the aircraft, of the real aircraft. So there are several different aircraft systems, and these pilots need to be trained on the functioning of these systems and how it behaves while they are flying. So my role revolved around developing the software for that, and that used to be delivered to be integrated in a real environment, and pilots used to be trained on it. So across my 4 years, I worked on several aircraft systems, such as the electrical system, the fuel system, and so on. uh, so uh, my role mainly involved a lot of stakeholder management, dealing with several cross-functional teams, and ultimately, delivering these aircraft system models for training pilots.
Right, right. So when did the thought of an MBA first come to your mind, right? And what was the motivation, or why did you want to pursue an MBA?
Yeah, so there's actually two parts to this story. So initially, I wanted to pursue an MBA right after my undergrad, and I was basically motivated by shows such as Shark Tank, where they used to present several entrepreneurial ideas and talk about different business concepts. So I wanted to do an MBA right after. So initially, I targeted to do it in India by attempting the CAT exam. And 2 to 3 years down the line, I realized that I wanted to have a more holistic evaluation of my profile. And also simultaneously, through my work experience, I kind of, realized what really I wanted to get into, what specifically, post MBA. So that was my motivation to start applying to, programs outside India, which have this more holistic evaluation of a candidate's profile. And yeah, that's how it started.
And how did you go about the GMAT preparation? How many attempts did you take, and what was the prep process like?
Yeah, so initially for me, GMAT, the exam GMAT felt slightly a bit easier since I had already been preparing for the CAT exam. But still, I wanted to have a more structured prep, because the exam structure is different, and the way it's adaptive based on each question's response. You have a different question coming up. So in order to prep for that, first I took up this course by Magoosh, and to just get my basics sorted out. And I also took out some additional practice tests offered by the mba.com website itself, and that really helped me understand the test structure really well, and perform according to that.
Right. Right. And I think you attempted it twice, right? So what was sort of, let's say, the delta, or how did you improve on the performance from the first, and achieve your target score?
Yeah, in my first attempt, I scored around 675 in the GMAT focus, and initially I was satisfied with the score. I thought I can apply to my desired programs using it. But a little more self-reflection, and finding out, doing more research about the different schools, and also by talking to you, I realized that there is always scope for improvement. So I gave another attempt, and during this attempt, luckily I was able to get a good quant score, a full 90, and that really helped me boost my overall score to 695. So I believe that the second attempt actually kind of contributed towards increasing my chances towards all of the schools which I was applying to.
Right. So I think that's a good segue to schools, prioritizing the right schools, right, or target schools. So can you talk about, considering what factors basically did you consider when you were looking at programs, and also geographies? I mean, I think US being one of the target geographies. And how did you approach sort of the school prioritization process?
Yeah, so related to the factors for prioritizing schools, mainly I was looking for, firstly, I looked based on geography, because I was targeting the European programs first. Just because I had been working, in a European company, and I was pretty much used to that work culture. And post MBA, I saw myself working in a similar kind of work culture. But while interacting with you and going through the process, I realized that we need to have in-depth analysis of different factors, such as ROI. Also, I was looking to get into product management, so the schools which are going to aid me in that, brand names which are known for tech, was another factor which I went for. And again, ROI was an important factor while deciding my list of schools. So based on all of these factors, of course, I worked with you, and we prioritized a list of schools which best matched my interests and my motivations.
Right. Right. Let's talk about Ross a bit, right, if you were to double click on that. What was, before even applying, right, before going to the essays and all those aspects, what was the research, or, understanding that you had about the school, or even conversations that you had with students at com, etc., that sort of motivated you, right, to sort of prioritize Ross?
Yeah, one of the main factors of Ross is, the alumni network is really very friendly and collaborative. So, whenever I used to approach any alumni or current students, I always used to get a very warm feeling from them, and a very friendly response and quick response. So, that was one of the main factors of choosing Ross. Secondly, I was always interested in a traditional MBA curriculum, and Ross is one of those schools which has a traditional MBA curriculum, also with a lot of electives in the field of manufacturing and operations, which was my primary interest. So that was another factor I looked for. Also, the school has a lot of focus around sustainability ideas related to preservation and environmentalism. So that's another factor which is important to me. So I took that into consideration as well while applying to roles.
Right, right. And I think, I mean, I would particularly agree with point one because that's something that I hear from people that are applying to Ross, especially it's the community of, people, alumni that go above and beyond, right,
Yeah.
to help the community, whether it's job search, whether it's internships or things like that. The class is big, but not too big, so you still have the opportunity to, form deeper bonds. I think that with the community. So yeah, I think that's a great point. So let's shift gears a bit now. Can you talk about sort of broadly um, regarding your profile, what were the strong points or differentiating factors, so pluses, USPs, etc., that you felt um, you know
Mhm.
helped you, and also contrarily any challenges or let's say because no profile is perfect, right? So plus minuses in terms of what were some of the perceived challenges, please, that you faced when you were applying.
Yeah. So firstly, I would like to talk about the strengths. So I believe that coming from an overrepresented pool of Indian male engineers from a tech background, I think one of the major factors which helped me was my performance during my undergrad. I think a high GPA really counts in terms of informing the admissions committee that you have a good, strong work ethic in terms of taking the challenge of the MBA curriculum. So I think that was one factor. Secondly, so my role at Airbus is kind of a niche role, which is software which is applied in the domain of aerospace. So I believe that was another factor which kind of helped me stood out from certain other candidates. And thirdly, I think through my application, through my essays and my CV, I was able to, draft a compelling story of why, particularly Ross would help me, and post MBA, how the skills which I've gained through my experience would transfer to it, and how I can make that transition, and why Ross makes sense. So I think that was the third point. And in terms of, I think a couple of weaknesses in my profile would be in terms of leadership experiences. Since I'm just 4 years, only 4 years into the industry, I don't have a lot of formal leadership titles. So that was a challenge. In order to overcome that, I think trying to frame the essays such that I could highlight the leadership qualities through my work or through the experience which I had. That really helped me in overcoming that bit. And so, a second weakness, I think, would be in terms of volunteering experiences. So, uh, from until my application process, I hadn't had any considerable volunteering experiences in the domain of sustainability, which I'm really passionate about. So, that was an initial factor, which was a limitation. But luckily, during my application process, I got an opportunity to volunteer for my organization in a field relating to sustainability. So that really helped me, add to my application to Ross.
Right, right. And I think it's an important point that you raised, Mohit, on the first point on the work experience, right? Work experience slash lack of formal leadership titles. And it's also something that I see from a lot of candidates, prospective candidates, is there are, I feel, more younger folks that are applying to MBA programs now compared to say 3 years or 5 years back. So, and I think it's important that in the scenario where your work experience is say 1 or 2 years lower than the median of the class, then good score, strong score, academics, as you said, and then also highlighting the leadership traits, right? Because it's not only formal leadership that counts; it's also these other nuances. Maybe you coordinated efforts across multiple teams, right? Or maybe you work with teams outside India, or maybe you negotiated terms with a certain stakeholder or client, or so on. So those traits are, in a way, very good proxies for even formal sort of leadership traits.
Mm.
Let's switch gears now. Let's talk about the application process itself, focused on ROS. In terms of because there are multiple components, right? Once you arrive on the right mix of schools, there's CVs, there's choosing recommenders, speaking to them, coordinating that, and then of course the essays and then interviews. So let's start with the CV, right? So what was the if you can talk about sort of our working process, how we started working on the CV, and then what were the steps that we took to finalize it.
Mhm. Yeah, so the CV initially was, in a state which was very relevant for job applications because I hadn't really updated my CV in a long time after joining Airbus. So initially it was in a very rudimentary state, and I think along with you, I went through close to 7 to 8 iterations to make it more MBA specific. And while going through these iterations, you really highlighted on the quantitative impact of the roles which I have had during the company. So that was a very important point in terms of uh, putting numbers to the experience which you have. And also another really interesting perspective which I got from you is, initially I went through listing just experiences or activities which at that moment came to my head because I was working on them currently. But you pointed out to the fact that previous to this role, whichever role you had in the company was of a longer duration. So highlighting those experiences based on the amount of duration is really important. So that was another additional point which really helped in shaping the CV and creating the final document.
Right, right, right. And what about the essays? I mean, Ross particularly has essays on career goals. How would Ross help? I think it's something along lines of how would map multidisciplinary projects help. And then there's also a community essay, right? What makes you unique, or how do you contribute to community, and so on. So can you talk a bit about the approach, the brainstorming, and the process that we sort of worked on right on the essays?
Yeah, with respect to the essays, initially, listing the points is easy, but framing it in a compelling story is a challenge. So, initially, having that right structure of the essays was really something which we worked upon. And trying to bring out different angles because for me, I had a limited set of anecdotes from my experience, and trying to bring out the different angles of the same anecdotes was one point which we really went through together. And overall, by going through several iterations, I think I was able to come up with these structure which was not just concise but also more impactful in terms of explaining the story behind it, following the star format and so on.
Right, right. And in terms of, let's say, particularly the research, right, specific to the school, which is important both for essays and interviews, we'll get to that in a bit. But basically, in terms of, can you talk a bit about how did you, let's say, go through the research side of things, right? Whether it's website, or speaking to students, alumni, info sessions, or so on, to get that specific, nuances, because that's extremely important, right? Rather than just saying something like the Ross is a great school, it's a great brand, identifying those specific nuances, whether it's a certain club, whether it's a trek, whether it's a certain project, or so on. So can you talk a bit about that aspect?
Yeah, so I started out with going to the Ross website itself. So it really, provides all of the different resources which the school offers, and going through all of the different clubs, the courses, the curriculum. Actually, familiarizing yourself with what the school is going to offer you, I think, is an important point, an important starting point. And later, in order to validate that information, talking to different alumni and different students who are currently studying at the school, I think that really helps. And when you talk to alumni, not just about their past experience in the school, but also their current role, and if it's something you're aspiring to get into, it would give you a third person's view or an additional insight of how the school really helps you to reach your your future roles. So that's another additional point which is really important. So I think trying to speak to as much people as possible, trying to get their insights is really valuable in terms of deciding which school is right for you, and also drafting all of these essays in a very compelling way, in a way which explains your story, and it makes sense of why you want to join this particular school.
Could you talk about the interview experience at Ross? What any from what you recall, what kind of topics were covered, and any insights that you want to share about the interview?
Yeah. I think in terms of the interview experience, my interview was pretty smooth. I had it with an alumni of the school in a similar field which I was looking to get into, which is product management. So the interview was quite smooth, and I had a balance of motivational questions and behavioral questions, and nothing really surprising was asked. And the interview experience also kind of validated the points which I already had an idea about Ross. For example, like the alumni network is extremely friendly and supportive, and also regarding the point of sustainability, the school emphasizes on values like sustainability a lot. So that was something else which kind of was validated by the interviewer which I had.
Right, right. And how did you prepare for the interviews? How did particularly our mock interviews process and so on? How did that help when you were actually on D-Day?
Yeah, so to start with the interview preparation, I kind of listed down all of my experiences in my professional journey up until that particular date, and I try to reflect upon what kind of transferable skills or qualities I can highlight through these experiences. So I prepared a list of several anecdotes, and also try to think of various questions in which could be asked, and the way I could respond with these anecdotes by offering different angles of my personality or my experience and so on. And post that, I think the interview sessions, the mock interview preparation which I had along with you, was also very helpful in kind of building that confidence of answering these questions. And you know we also prepared for any surprise questions which might be asked. So that also really helped prepare me in terms of what to expect during the main interview.
Can you talk a bit about our working process, right? So I think maybe 6, 7 months before when we first reached out, and when we started the process with an evaluation of the profile and so on. So any aspects of it that you recall, or, how it helped you, and so this would help kind of future candidates that may want to work with us.
Yeah, sure. So initially, I found you through a Google search, and I found your LinkedIn profile, and I texted you. So I have in the past I've had some bad experience in terms of availing such academic services. So trusting the person who you're working with was a very important factor to me, and right from my first interaction with you, I could sense that we could really work well together, and it would really be beneficial for me to work with you. So first we had a profile evaluation, and I think you suggested to me that having a second GMAT attempt could really improve my chances in terms of highlighting my profile during the applications. So I worked on that initially, and once we had that, we sat down together to work on the B school shortlist. And I really love the structured way in which you had made out a plan of, by when we'll target finalizing the CV, when we'll have each of the applications ready, and so on, when the LORs should be ready, and all of that structured way was really helpful to me, because managing work along with applications is a really difficult task, and having such a structured method really helped me plan it well. And also, coming to the another point I would like to highlight is the video essays. So certain schools which I had applied to had video interviews, and initially it kind of was challenging to me, because the structure in which the way it is carried out, where a timer runs and you're supposed to answer these questions, it was really kind of unsettling for me. So the way you motivated me to work on those, and that was really a helpful point. And finally, I think the interview prep, and also up until waiting for the admission results, you were a constant motivator, and really having that positive outlook helped me throughout the process.
Right, right. Yeah, glad to hear that, and I'm glad to have been part of your journey. I think you're amongst the highest, let's say, dollar scholarship earners in our cohort this year, right? So congrats again for that. So
Thank you.
yeah, thanks again, Mohit, for your time. Maybe let's just wrap it up with any if you were to sort of talk or share your key tips or insights for candidates that are looking at MBA programs, right? Particularly US Top 15, ROS, and the likes. What would those be?
Yeah, so I think the first point would be really starting the preparation early. I think starting your preparation around 5 to 6 months before the application cycles would really help you to not just have the time to work on everything, but also reflect well on what do you want to do post MBA. So it's not necessary that you need to have the complete clarity of what you want to do, but having that initial idea really helps in terms of drafting a compelling story, and putting forward your applications well. And also, having the GMAT or the GRE, the test prep done early on would help. Sorting that and getting it out of the way would help you focus on the other more time consuming aspects of the application later on in the process, especially when you're working. I think making time for that would be another challenge. So having that sorted out early would be really helpful. And last but not the least, yeah, so making sure that you are exploring all of the resources which is being offered by the program which you are planning to apply to. I think having all of that information would really help you make a more informed decision in terms of choosing the school, and also in terms of, again, drafting a compelling story, and basically conveying to the admissions committee of why their particular school is going to help you in your MBA journey.
Right, right. Yeah, that's very good advice. So yeah, wrap this up then. Thank you again, Mohit, for your time, and wish you all the best for a great time at ROS and your journey beyond.
Thank you, Arvind.